There are moments in life when heaven opens without warning, when the door you've been knocking on suddenly swings wide. The question is not will the favor of God come, but will you be ready when it does? Beloved, there are seasons when God seems silent, when we wait, pray, and wonder if heaven has forgotten our name. But I came to tell you today, the silence is not denial, it's divine preparation. You see, when God moves, He doesn't need time. He only needs your readiness. Joseph went from the prison to the palace in one day. Ruth went from gathering leftovers to owning the field overnight. The disciples went from fear to boldness in a single hour when the Spirit came. The favor of God doesn't always knock gently. Sometimes it rushes in like a wind, and only those who are spiritually awake will recognize it. So I ask you, if God's favor arrived suddenly tonight, would you be ready to receive it? Stay with me, because before this message ends, I'll show you how to position yourself for the sudden favor of heaven. God's favor often arrives suddenly, not gradually. When we look throughout Scripture and even at the testimonies of believers through the generations, one pattern is unmistakable. God moves suddenly. He does not need permission, preparation time, or human strategy to bring His word to pass. When His appointed time comes, His power breaks through like light in darkness, and what seemed impossible yesterday becomes inevitable today. The nature of divine favor is that it can appear without warning. One moment you are standing in lack, and the next, the hand of God shifts everything in your favor. We often expect God to work through a process, to unfold things step by step, but divine favor does not always follow human logic. God is not limited by time or circumstance. In one breath, He created the heavens and the earth. In one command, He brought order out of chaos. In one word, He called Lazarus from the tomb. And in one moment, He can call you from obscurity into purpose, from brokenness into blessing. When the Lord moves suddenly, it's not a coincidence, it's divine precision. Heaven's calendar does not delay, it aligns perfectly with obedience and faith. Consider Joseph. For years he was forgotten in a prison cell, falsely accused, isolated and betrayed. Nothing about his life suggested favor. Yet in a single day, the call came from Pharaoh's palace. The chains were broken, the prison clothes removed, and the crown of authority placed upon him. Overnight, he moved from the lowest position in Egypt to the highest. That's how suddenly God's favor operates. It doesn't climb the ladder one step at a time. It elevates you beyond what natural processes can achieve. What took years of suffering was overturned in one divine moment. When God decides it is time to favor you, no one can stop it. Human systems, opinions, and limitations become irrelevant. The same people who overlooked you will suddenly need your wisdom. The same doors that were locked will open of their own accord. Because divine favor does not negotiate, it dominates. It turns impossibility into testimony. The Israelites saw this at the Red Sea. The enemy was behind them, the sea before them, and fear within them. But in a moment, God split the waters and made a path where there was none. That was a sudden move of favor. Favor that created a way when nature itself resisted. Sometimes we confuse waiting with denial, but waiting is often the womb of suddenly. Before the day of Pentecost, the disciples waited. They didn't know when or how the promise would come, only that it would. Then, suddenly, there came a sound from heaven like a rushing mighty wind. The room was filled with the presence of God, and their lives were never the same. It did not happen gradually. The Spirit did not trickle in. He came in fullness, power, and immediacy. That is how divine favor arrives. You may not see it forming, but you will feel it when it manifests. It will come with force, clarity, and transformation. Divine favor doesn't wait for your circumstances to align, it transforms them. When Daniel was thrown into the lion's den, favor didn't prevent the trial, but it manifested suddenly in the midst of it. God sent an angel to shut the lions' mouths. That's favor arriving suddenly. It didn't come before the challenge, it came in the challenge. This is a mystery. Sometimes God allows you to reach the brink, to face what looks final, so that when His favor appears, no one can mistake it for human intervention. The darker the night, the brighter the light shines. The deeper the pit, the greater the rescue. We must understand that divine favor has its own timing. The human heart grows anxious in waiting, but heaven's timing is never delayed. God moves at the intersection of faith and readiness. Think of the widow in 2 Kings 4. She had lost everything, and her sons were about to be taken as slaves. She cried to the prophet, and in that moment, divine favor entered her home. Elisha gave her one instruction: gather vessels. As she obeyed, the oil flowed. The miracle was not gradual, it was immediate. The moment she acted in faith, God's favor multiplied what she had. Her little became abundance. The blessing didn't wait for her to earn it. It was activated by obedience. That's the power of sudden favor. It is attracted by faith, not by effort. Human effort can take you far, but divine favor can take you beyond human reach. When favor appears, time itself seems to bend. Years of waiting can be redeemed in moments. Sarah waited decades for Isaac, but when the word of the Lord came, her womb responded instantly. It did not matter that nature said no, favor said yes. When heaven speaks, earth must comply. This suddenness of favor is not a sign of unpredictability, but of sovereignty. God moves suddenly because He wants no one else to share the glory. He acts in ways that defy logic so that every eye will know this was the Lord's doing. Sometimes He allows the situation to decay to the point of hopelessness, not to destroy you, but to display His power in its fullest. Lazarus was dead for 4 days, and by human measure it was over. But Jesus arrived and called him forth. That's sudden favor, life out of death, restoration beyond repair. When we walk by faith, we must always expect the suddenness of God. It keeps our spirit awake, our prayers alive, and our hearts humble. We never know the hour of His intervention, but we know the certainty of His word. One moment of divine favor can erase years of toil. One encounter can lift you higher than decades of striving. That is why the faithful never give up, because they understand that with God, things may look still, but under the surface, preparation is happening. The ground may seem dry, but clouds are forming. The door may seem closed, but the hinges are loosening. God's favor comes suddenly because He is both the author and finisher of every story. When He begins a work, He completes it in His perfect time. The delay you feel is not a denial, it is alignment. Every unseen adjustment, every hidden preparation, every quiet season is positioning you for a moment of sudden favor. You may think nothing is happening, but heaven is orchestrating details you cannot see. The people, resources, and opportunities are being placed into divine alignment so that when the moment comes, everything fits perfectly. And when that moment arrives, there will be no confusion. You won't need to force doors open or beg for approval. God's favor will carry its own signature. It will be undeniable. It will cause men to marvel and say, "Surely the Lord has done this." Favor will come with speed, but it will not come before you are ready. It will arrive when your faith has matured enough to sustain what it brings. Because favor that arrives prematurely can crush instead of bless. So God waits until your heart, your vision, and your obedience are in harmony with His purpose. Then, when the time comes, He moves suddenly. It is a divine paradox. We wait long, and then it happens fast. Years of faithfulness may precede a single day of transformation. That's why patience and expectation must walk together. We do not wait in despair. We wait in readiness. We believe that even if nothing seems to move, God is still working behind the scenes. And when His favor breaks forth, it will be like the dawn after the longest night, swift, brilliant, and unstoppable. Preparation is the proof of expectation. Faith is not passive. It is active readiness for what God has promised. When someone truly believes that divine favor is on the way, their life begins to align with that belief. Faith without preparation is nothing more than wishful thinking. Preparation reveals the depth of one's conviction. If you believe rain is coming, you build a shelter or plant seeds. If you believe favor is coming, you make room for it in your heart, your plans, and your daily life. True expectation changes behavior long before manifestation appears. All throughout Scripture, those who experienced the sudden favor of God were people who prepared for it, even when they could not see it. Noah did not wait for rain to begin building the ark. God told him a flood would come, and for years, under clear skies, he worked faithfully. He endured mockery, misunderstanding, and fatigue, but his preparation was a declaration of faith. He was saying with every strike of the hammer, "I believe what God said." When the rain finally came, he was not caught unready. The ark became the proof that his expectation was genuine. The unprepared were swept away, but the prepared were lifted higher. Preparation is never wasted. Even when the promise seems delayed, every act of readiness becomes a seed of faith that heaven honors. God watches not only what you pray for, but how you prepare for what you pray for. Many people pray for increase, but never enlarge their capacity to receive it. They ask for opportunities, but do not refine their skills. They desire divine connections, but refuse to cultivate humility and character. Preparation positions you for favor. Without it, even if favor comes, you won't be able to handle it. When Elisha met the widow who had nothing left but a jar of oil, his instruction was clear: borrow vessels, not a few. That was preparation. The measure of her expectation determined the measure of her miracle. The oil flowed according to her readiness. If she had borrowed only 1 or 2 vessels, the oil would have stopped early. But because she prepared abundantly, the blessing overflowed abundantly. Faith without preparation limits what God can do. The miracle is always proportional to your readiness to receive. Preparation is not always physical. Sometimes it is spiritual and mental. David was anointed as king when he was still a shepherd boy. Instead of rushing to the throne, he went back to tending sheep. Those hidden years were not wasted. They were years of preparation. He learned courage in the fields, strategy in solitude, and worship in obscurity. When the day came for him to face Goliath, he was already ready. He didn't have to find faith. He had been training in it. Preparation made his victory possible. Divine favor found him ready because he had used his waiting season wisely. So often, believers wait for God to move, but forget that God is also waiting for them to prepare. Heaven responds to readiness. The 10 virgins in Jesus' parable all started with lamps, but only 5 carried extra oil. When the bridegroom delayed, the foolish ones grew complacent. They believed the invitation was enough, but they did not prepare for delay. When the moment of visitation arrived, they were found lacking. The door did not close because they were unwanted. It closed because they were unprepared. The wise, however, had anticipated both the promise and the process. Their readiness proved their faith, and they entered into joy. Preparation distinguishes the expectant from the indifferent. Many times, God will test your faith by requiring preparation before proof. The Israelites were told to march around Jericho for 7 days, even though the walls showed no sign of weakness. Every step was preparation. Every lap was a declaration of expectation. On the seventh day, when they shouted, the walls fell instantly. Had they refused to prepare through obedience, the miracle would never have manifested. Favor meets faith in motion. The ones who walk in obedience while waiting are the ones who see sudden breakthroughs. Preparation is also the language of stewardship. God entrusts greater things to those who manage small things well. Before Jesus multiplied the loaves and fishes, he asked the disciples to make the people sit down in groups. That organization was preparation. The blessing was ready, but the structure to handle it was not. Once the crowd was positioned, favor flowed. Many believers desire miracles, but they have not arranged their lives to sustain them. Preparation builds the capacity to hold what God pours out. Without preparation, blessings can become burdens. Sometimes preparation looks like pruning. God may strip away distractions, relationships, or habits that cannot accompany you into the next season. It can feel painful, but it is purposeful. Every pruning is preparation for fruitfulness. A farmer does not cut branches to harm the tree. He cuts to make room for greater growth. When God is preparing you for sudden favor, He will refine your character, purify your motives, and test your patience. Each challenge is shaping you to carry what He intends to release. Preparation also involves aligning your words with your faith. You cannot prepare for favor while speaking doubt. Your language must match your expectation. The woman with the issue of blood did not only believe, she said within herself, "If I may but touch His garment, I shall be made whole." That was her preparation. Her words created the pathway for her miracle. Expectation without confession remains dormant. What you declare reveals what you are preparing for. When Elijah prophesied rain after years of drought, he sent his servant to look toward the sea again and again. That repetition was preparation. Elijah had already built an altar, repaired what was broken, and offered a sacrifice. His preparation created the atmosphere for rain. When the small cloud appeared, he didn't despise it, he ran with expectation. Many miss their moment because they look for the full miracle before they prepare for it. But faith celebrates small signs as proof that favor is near. Preparation begins when you act as though the promise is already fulfilled. In the natural, preparation precedes promotion. A soldier trains long before the battle. A student studies long before the examination. In the same way, God trains His children through preparation before He reveals favor. The waiting season is often the proving ground of readiness. If you handle the ordinary with faithfulness, God will trust you with the extraordinary. Every act of obedience becomes an investment in the future manifestation of favor. Preparation demands consistency, even when results are unseen. Noah kept building, Abraham kept walking, Hannah kept praying, and Peter kept casting the net. Each one faced moments of discouragement, yet their persistence became proof of their belief. God honors those who refuse to stop preparing, even when others give up. The world calls it foolishness, but heaven calls it faith. Preparation declares that you trust God's timing more than your own understanding. It's easy to prepare when signs of success are visible, but true preparation happens in silence. When nothing moves, when prayers seem unanswered, that is when faith proves itself through readiness. The believer who continues to worship, to serve, to plan, and to give even when doors seem closed, is the one who will recognize favor when it arrives. The unprepared often miss their moment because favor rarely announces itself before appearing. It comes suddenly, and only those already ready can seize it. Your preparation tells heaven that you are expecting something divine. When God sees that readiness, He accelerates manifestation. He does not pour new wine into old wineskins. He waits until the vessel is renewed, stretched, and made strong enough to carry the blessing. Every moment spent preparing enlarges your capacity. You may not see results yet, but heaven keeps records of obedience. Every act of readiness brings you closer to divine alignment. Faith that does not prepare is not faith at all. Belief must move your hands as well as your heart. Expectation must shape your daily routine. The farmer who expects a harvest wakes early to till the soil, even when no cloud appears in the sky. The worshipper who expects revival prays faithfully, even when the heavens seem silent. Preparation is the invisible work that produces visible miracles. It is the bridge between prophecy and fulfillment, between promise and possession. God's favor may arrive suddenly, but it always finds its landing place among the prepared. Prayer is the bridge between waiting and suddenly. It is the sacred space where heaven and earth meet, where the unseen becomes tangible, and where delays are transformed into divine appointments. Every promise from God travels through the channel of prayer before it manifests. Without prayer, faith loses its power, and expectation loses its focus. Prayer is not merely the act of speaking words to God. It is the continual alignment of the heart with His will. It builds an atmosphere that welcomes divine favor. When you pray, you are not persuading God to act. You are preparing yourself to receive what He has already purposed to give. In moments of waiting, prayer becomes the believer's lifeline. It keeps the spirit awake when time seems long and circumstances seem silent. The heart that prays remains connected to divine timing. Waiting without prayer leads to weariness, but waiting with prayer leads to strength. Those who pray in their delay are being prepared for their suddenly. The transformation begins within long before it manifests without. Prayer sharpens faith, cleanses motives, and matures expectation, so that when favor finally arrives, it finds a vessel ready to carry it. Scripture shows again and again that every sudden move of God was preceded by seasons of prayer. The outpouring at Pentecost did not happen randomly. It came to a people who had tarried in prayer for 10 days. They gathered in one accord, their hearts united in hunger for God's promise. The sound from heaven, the rushing mighty wind, was not a surprise to those who had been praying. It was the fulfillment of their persistence. Prayer had built a landing strip for divine power. Without that atmosphere of prayer, the sudden arrival of the Spirit would have found no place to rest. When you pray, you create alignment between divine intention and earthly manifestation. Prayer transforms promise into possession. Daniel understood this principle well. He read in the Scriptures that the time for Israel's deliverance had come, yet he did not sit idle. He turned to God in fasting and prayer. His prayers activated the fulfillment of prophecy. The angel Gabriel came swiftly, saying that from the first day Daniel set his heart to pray, his words were heard. Even though resistance in the spiritual realm delayed the answer, persistence in prayer kept the connection open until the breakthrough arrived. Prayer sustains the bridge when opposition tries to block it. Prayer is also the place where God reshapes our perception. Often, while we wait, we think the delay is denial. But through prayer, God reveals that He is not withholding, He is preparing. In prayer, the believer's impatience melts into understanding. The waiting becomes worship. The believer learns to see time through God's eyes, where every moment serves a purpose. Hannah prayed year after year for a child, and through her tears, her faith deepened. Her prayer life carried her through barrenness until the day her Samuel arrived. The same woman who wept in sorrow one year returned to the temple rejoicing the next. Her story reminds us that prayer is never wasted. Every whispered cry builds a bridge to the day of rejoicing. Prayer keeps your spirit sensitive to divine timing. When Elijah prayed for rain after years of drought, he didn't just speak once and walk away. He bowed down and prayed again and again, sending his servant to look toward the sea 7 times. On the 7th time, a small cloud appeared, no bigger than a man's hand. That cloud was the first sign of sudden favor. Elijah didn't despise it, he recognized it. The rain was coming, without prayer. He might have missed the sign. Persistent prayer sharpens spiritual vision, so that when the first hint of breakthrough appears, you can discern it and respond in faith. Prayer is the language of intimacy between God and His people. It is not only about requests, but about relationship. In the waiting season, prayer keeps the fire of communion alive. Those who stop praying grow cold and distant, but those who keep praying stay sensitive to the whisper of the Spirit. In prayer, God reveals strategies, instructions, and insights that prepare you for what's ahead. Many of the sudden blessings people call coincidences are actually the result of quiet obedience learned in prayer. The voice of the Lord becomes familiar in the secret place, so when favor comes, you are not confused or afraid. You recognize His hand. When Jesus faced the cross, He spent hours in Gethsemane praying. He could have avoided the anguish of that moment, but He chose prayer over comfort because He understood its power. In that garden, prayer became the bridge between the pain of waiting and the glory of resurrection. Through prayer, He aligned His will with the Father's. Through prayer, He found strength to endure. The same principle holds true for every believer. Prayer does not always remove the trial, but it transforms how you walk through it. The waiting place becomes the proving ground of your faith, and prayer keeps you standing when everything else pushes you to give up. The enemy fears a praying believer because prayer connects you to divine authority. It is through prayer that you enforce God's promises in your life. Without prayer, you are aware of the promise, but powerless to activate it. When Peter was imprisoned, the church gathered to pray continuously. Their prayers became the bridge for a miracle. In the middle of the night, an angel appeared, the chains fell off, and Peter walked free. The church's prayer turned captivity into deliverance. That is the nature of prayer. It creates pathways for heaven's intervention. In times of silence, prayer becomes the rehearsal of your faith. When no evidence appears, you continue to speak with God as if the promise were already fulfilled. Every time you pray, you remind heaven that you still believe. You reinforce your trust, and your heart becomes more anchored. The flesh grows weary, but the spirit is strengthened. Through prayer, you cultivate endurance, and endurance is what carries you to the moment of suddenly. Prayer changes atmospheres. When Paul and Silas were imprisoned, they prayed and sang hymns in the midnight hour. Chains did not discourage them. They praised through pain. And suddenly, the prison shook. Doors opened, and freedom came. Their prayers did not escape through the ceiling. They shook the foundation of the earth. That's the supernatural force of prayer. It doesn't just reach heaven, it moves the earth. In the waiting season, prayer transforms despair into power. It shifts environments, awakens possibilities, and makes room for divine favor to operate. Often, people misunderstand waiting as inactivity, but waiting in prayer is one of the most powerful forms of faith. It says to God, "I may not see it yet, but I trust you completely." This attitude attracts divine favor. The woman who approached Jesus for healing for her daughter refused to stop asking. Even when silence met her first request, she persisted. Her faith, expressed through continual prayer, drew a response from Jesus himself. That persistence turned a moment of waiting into a moment of sudden favor. In prayer, you surrender control. You acknowledge that your timeline is not the measure of God's faithfulness. Prayer keeps your heart humble, your mind focused, and your spirit expectant. It purifies your desires until what you want aligns with what He wills. Then, when the answer comes, it fits perfectly because both you and the blessing have been prepared. Prayer is not about convincing God, it's about conforming to Him. In that alignment, the bridge between waiting and suddenly becomes unbreakable. Those who live in prayer are never caught off guard by favor because they have been expecting it. Their spiritual senses are tuned. Their hearts are open. They understand that every no, or not yet, in prayer is simply another step closer to no. Each moment spent in the presence of God strengthens their confidence that favor is inevitable. Prayer turns waiting into worship, anticipation into assurance. It fills the waiting room with peace instead of frustration. It is in that peace that God moves suddenly. Prayer is not just a discipline, it is a declaration that you believe God is still able. Every time you bow your head or lift your voice, you are building the bridge that connects your present to your promise. You may not know when the suddenly will happen, but you know it will. Every prayer builds momentum in the unseen realm until one day the heavens respond, and what you've been believing for appears before your eyes.